This is the eHealth Radio Network, your source for health advice on demand. And now your host, Eric Michaels.
Thanks for joining us once again here on the eHealth Radio Network. This is your host, Eric Michaels. Today on the program, we're speaking with Tanya Rabhan, the best-selling author of The Real Pandemic, Mentally Thrive Through Psychological Warfare. Tanya is a life coach certified in NeuroLinguistic Programming, Hypnotherapy, and Holistic Nutrition. And Tanya, thanks for joining us here today.
Thanks so much for having me.
And you're certainly more than welcome. Good to have you out here today, and thanks for your time. So for starters, let's start here. What made you think the COVID pandemic had such an impact on mental health? Let's start there.
Yeah, well, the quarantine. You had all the isolation with quarantine. And so you have these people being isolated. First of all, our elderly population who rely on their visitors to come help them out, family to come see them, because a lot of times they're lonely. They don't have their spouses anymore. They need them to do their grocery shopping, take care of them. And, they look forward to their grandkids coming to see them. And once they didn't have the grandkids and their normal visitors coming in, that isolation just really hit them hard. And then you have the layoffs and the business closings hit people financially really hard, some more than others. But anytime, you're having a financial crisis, that's going to definitely affect your psyche a lot. And then what really, really struck me that inspired me to write this was I started hearing stories of children committing suicide. I remember one morning, I was listening to the news and they're talking about a 10-year-old that committed suicide. And I have 3 boys. They're older now, but I was thinking back to my boys when they were 10. They were like climbing trees and chasing our chickens. And I couldn't really fathom any type of thought like suicide going through their head. And it just upset me so much that I really felt that I needed to get something out there to help some people.
Well, certainly, as you mentioned, it was an awful time, a trying time, and such a difficult time. There's not a word to describe it, but I'm really appreciative of what you're trying to do to aid those that went through such a tough time and still are on the mental health end of things. Really appreciate that. And again, as mentioned, you are certified in NeuroLinguistic Programming. What is NeuroLinguistic Programming for those that aren't so familiar?
Yeah, it's quite a mouthful, isn't it? There are a lot of different definitions you can find if you were to look it up, and some of them are very complicated and confusing. So I'm going to try to give your listeners the easiest one. It's how language can rewire our neurological patterns. So I'd like to give kind of a metaphor here. If you have a computer, you have your hardware and you have your software. And basically your software is what organizes your information in your computer. And our brains have developed in the same way. So what NLP does is it discovers how the software works and how we can write our software and kind of write our own software in a way that benefits us better, to serve our life better. So let's just take, for example, you and I, we could experience the same exact set of circumstances, but we could get completely different meaning from those circumstances because we have different senses and we have experienced different things in our lives. So every set of circumstances is subjective from one person to the next. It all depends on the meaning each individual gives that. So we all have these frames that we have formed, and these frames can limit our relationships. They can limit how we interact with the world. And so NLP really is about learning what software each person has so we can find a way to change it and create a better reality for the person.
Great explanation there. That is most helpful. Now, as far as hypnotherapy goes, can everyone be hypnotized? So what's your thought on that?
Yeah, so that's a little bit of a loaded question, and I'll kind of explain why. So there's so much misconceptions when it comes to hypnotherapy. Everybody goes into a trance state pretty much every day, and sometimes several times during the day. So whenever you're like maybe getting a little dazed, we call it daydreaming. So you're just staring into space because you zone out, we might call it. That's actually going into a trance state. Or, there's some times where, say you have the same route, you drive to work every day. And sometimes it's so routine, it's early in the morning, you pull into the driveway at work and you don't even remember the ride there because you zoned out because you're so used to just driving that pattern. You were in a trance state getting to your work that morning. So we're all capable of it, but you cannot be hypnotized if you're going into, a hypnotist and you have the mentality that you don't want to be hypnotized. You can't be hypnotized if you don't want to be and you resist it.
Really do appreciate the feedback. I'm sure listeners have learned something already. I know I have, and we certainly appreciate your visit. We're speaking with Tanya Rabhan, the best-selling author of The Real Pandemic, Mentally Thrive Through Psychological Warfare. Tanya is a life coach, certified in NeuroLinguistic Programming, hypnotherapy, and holistic nutrition, and she's joined us here today on eHealth Radio's Mental Health Channel, a part of the eHealth Radio Network. Now, continuing on, would you tell us a little bit about the Sylva Method?
Yeah, so the Sylva Method was developed years ago by Jose Sylva. He was the first to come out with a mind development program that teaches you to function at an alpha brain state. If you're not aware, our brains work off of frequencies, and the main frequencies are the beta, alpha, delta, and theta state. You maybe have heard of it, like if you ever listen to our different states of like when we're in sleep or REM sleep, those are the frequencies they're talking about. Now, the normal person every day when we're in our normal waking state and talking like we are now, we're in what's called the beta state. And when we're sleeping, we're in like delta, theta. Alpha is when you're kind of transitioning over, when you're sleepy and just about ready to go to sleep. And so alpha is where we are the most creative. Our brain can really come up with things that it sometimes doesn't come up with. And it can be really creative. It can just absorb more information as well. So if you wanted to learn something quickly, that would be the state you'd want to be in to learn. And so Jose had actually experimented on his own children first to try to help them be better at school. And during this time, he had just done a lot of different like meditations, hypnosis, things like that on his daughter, and really developed these great tools to be able to get you into this alpha state of thinking. And a lot of it is very similar to NLP and hypnosis, but it just basically gets you an alpha state frequency while you're still awake.
Yeah, really appreciate your giving us some background and the origin, on the Sylva Method. That is certainly most helpful as well. Now, tell me, what services do you offer if people could use further help per the conversation today? Get into that a little bit. I'm sure listeners would appreciate it.
Yeah, so I do one-on-one coaching for people, and I do offer digital courses for those who don't want to do the one-on-one coaching and want to kind of take it at their own pace at home. I have that option as well on my website.
And speaking of which, give us your website where folks can contact you accordingly.
Yeah, it is www.chainbreakersmindsetcoaching.com. chainbreakersmindsetcoaching.com.
And of course, we'll leave that link within the show notes of this broadcast to aid the audience. Before you go in conclusion, any closing thoughts, a final word, or anything else you'd like to make mention of as we conclude today?
You know, if you're struggling right now, some things to keep in mind is just live in the moment. Try not to live in the past, because if you're living in the past, you're going to be depressed. If you're thinking about the future too much, you're going to be anxious. So being mindfulness is really important right now, to just live in the moment. Exercise can help if you're feeling anxious, and doing some deep breathing can help you get in the moment as well.
Great advice as we conclude here today. Living in the moment, that certainly is some sound advice for sure. Again, folks, for more details, visit chainbreakersmindsetcoaching.com. Tanya, all the best, and thanks for joining us here today.
Yeah, thank you.
Once again, we've been speaking with Tanya Rabehan, the best-selling author, The Real Pandemic, Mentally Thrive Through Psychological Warfare. Tanya is a life coach certified in NeuroLinguistic Programming, Hypnotherapy, and Holistic Nutrition. And once again, for all the details, visit chainbreakersmindsetcoaching.com. And again, this has been your host, Eric Michaels, and we do thank you for your continued support of the eHealth Radio Network. Join us again soon for another episode that will help further expand your knowledge on those things that are important to your health and wellness. For more eHealth Radio reports, we invite you to visit our main radio channel site at eHealthRadioNetwork.com. And as always, we do thank you for tuning in.
Thanks for tuning in to the eHealth Radio Network. For more information or to subscribe to this podcast, visit eHealthRadioNetwork.com.